This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. I think I'm hungover, but I only had 4 glasses of whiskey last night.
Only 4?
Yeah,
Only 4.
But it was Macallan, so that's good.
That's the right choice.
Yeah.
So Stanley's hungover.
I'm not.
Nothing new.
I haven't been hungover in so long.
Why not?
Because I don't drink like that anymore. When we first started doing the show, for those of you on
God.
Facebook Live, I used to
Stanley
drink
did.
heavily every Saturday night and then literally come into the studio hungover.
You are hard. Like, one time you fell asleep on air.
I had the flu
like,
that day,
literally, it was
Selena.
like, whatever, Stanley.
I feel like I'm the only person that didn't do any kind of celebrating of that kind yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I had 1 ginger beer.
1 ginger
Wow.
beer.
4% alcohol.
Get out of the studio right now. So, guys,
discipline.
we are back on Let Your Voice
However,
Be
it was
Heard.
the NYC Cannabis Parade.
Ooh.
So I was saying I didn't celebrate in that way.
Right.
Hold on, hold your thought for 1 second. So we are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR. If you were just tuning in, you should be because the show just started. This is Stanley Fritz, and if you want to talk to me, you can follow me on Twitter at Stan Fritz. You can also do the same thing on Instagram at Stan Fritz. If you also go to the Snapchats, I deleted that, but you can still follow me at Stan Fritz. I think I changed the name before I closed it out. And what did I miss, Selena? On Facebook, facebook.com/Stan Fritz. Actually, Stanley Goodhair Fritz. Don't ask.
Thank you for that. So yes, this is Let Your Voice Be Heard, where we talk politics, social issues, foreign policy from a diverse perspective. Happy Sunday, guys. I'm very happy to be here. If you're in New York City, do not drive because today is the 5-borough bike tour. And yeah, it was pretty hard. I literally had to drive through the Bronx to get to Harlem. So it was a little messy, but you know what? I've survived. I'm here,
survived?
unlike last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, my name is Selena Hill. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook Instagram and Twitter at Miss Selena Hill. Miss is spelled with an MS. And Twitter, no, I said Twitter. Facebook, Selena Hill. But we have a very special show, guys. If you're watching via Facebook Live, you probably noticed that our co-hosts, our regulars, Alyssa Fuchs, she is not here. She is literally in the 5-borough bike tour. So thank you, Alyssa, for holding up traffic today. And Jackie Cohen, who is in Toronto enjoying life, living her best life because, why would you be on the radio on an early Sunday morning when you could be in Toronto?
I think Jackie's related to Drake. She's always in Toronto now.
You know what? She's always in the 6.
Always in the 6. The 6 is getting washed by the,
She
23
is.
right now.
But
LeBron's destroying them.
yeah, that's what I heard. There was this meme that said LeBron James is going to turn the 0-2 into the 0-3. And I was just like, okay, that's funny. So we have a very special guest here with us. We have Catherine Bresler.
There we go, Selena.
Okay, co-founder of People for Bernie Sanders. She is also an educator here in New York City, and she's an activist. Welcome to the show, Catherine.
Good morning. I was also held up by the borough bike tour as I passed by Adam Clayton, the building. There was live music out in front, and I had to wait as the bikes went across. Did a quick little IG video. Said I was on my way over here. I guess you can follow me on all of those platforms at KatBrezler at Kat Bresler on all of the platforms.
K Breezy.
Breezy. So we have a great show lined up. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking about Puerto Rico and that tragic May Day protest that ended up with peaceful protesters being tear gassed in Puerto Rico. I mean, they're just protesting for what? Schools, pensions, jobs, their livelihoods. It's a disaster. And, you know, it's time for us.
Electricity.
Right, electricity. Water.
The big things.
Like the simple things that we as Americans all enjoy. They are American. Right? They are American. But they're being treated as this stepchild. Like, it's horrible. It's horrible. And Puerto Rico has been feeling the effects, the ramifications of the way our central government and our federal government treats them for decades. And this is all pretty much exploded after Hurricane Maria. So we're going to talk about that. And before we do, we have a couple other news stories, some fun stuff to talk about. Right, Stanley?
Like Bill Cosby?
I said fun stuff.
We get to make fun of him. You know what they should do? Did you see Infinity War? Of course you didn't see Infinity War.
No, I actually was supposed to see. I had passes to see a pre-screening.
What?
I couldn't
Why didn't you
make
get those
it.
to me?
Oh, please.
Wait, what do you mean, oh, please?
Stanley, as much as you do not keep me informed on your, like, whereabouts and livelihood, like, you got to be kidding me.
So Selena's mad at me because I didn't tell her that I was moderating a panel yesterday by the New York Urban League Young Professionals. But I've like done something at their State of Young Black New York every year for the last 3 years.
Except for last year when I was there.
Oh, I was in Albany.
Right.
Yeah, so you can't get mad at me for that. But, guys, we do have a pretty good show, and I'm excited to have you guys on here. It's going to be lit. By the way, Danny, hello, beautiful to you. So, guys, if you're on Facebook Live, feel free to give...
now we're live.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, now we are live.
If people are watching, then it has to be happening.
Yeah. Feel free to leave us questions, comments, curse words. We won't read the curse words because, we can't say curse words on air, but we will be happy to receive them all. And today's show is going to be legend, wait for it, Dairy. Selena, say some words so I can cue a song.
Sure. So, and of course, if you want to let your voice be heard, call us up. The number is 212-650-6903. You can also tweet us at BeHeard_radio. And of course, you can leave comments on our Facebook Live. Is the Facebook Live upside down?
Yeah, good job, Selena. I'll take it out in a second.
I'm going to go fix it.
Louisiana.
We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. If you're just tuning in, good job, because we are just now getting our crap together. This is Stanley Fritz. I'm here with Selena Hill, and of course, the brand new guest of the show, the immaculate, the brilliant, the oh so wonderful and powerful Bronx mommy, K Breezy, Kat Bresler.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That was my radio voice. You liked it?
That intro was everything. Guys, if you don't know, she's also the co-founder of People for Bernie Sanders. She's an educator, and she is an activist. What type of activist? Or did I ask you that already?
No, I mean...
that Future uses.
This goes back a long time. When I was a student at Lehman College, which is also a CUNY school, shout out to CUNY, I started... protesting the war, having debates on campus about whether or not we should be at war, and showing up to demonstrations at like Fordham Plaza, saying that we should do college, not combat. And that you start going like once a month to these things, and then you start showing up to a meeting every other week, and pretty soon it's an everyday affair in your life. Moved from that towards Occupy Wall Street, Fight for 15, refusing the test and the opt-out movement in the state of New York, and on to Feel the Burn Bernie Sanders campaign.
So Catherine is really in these streets. Like, you are literally marching and protesting for all of these social causes. Obviously, we appreciate your activism. We appreciate you being here today. Thank you. And so let's just kick off the news roundup. This is the time where we talk about all the news stories in the past week that made us laugh, cry, delete Facebook, get really upset. Like, it's always a lot going on.
Was there a choice?
No, there's never a choice. But before we get to the past week, I just want to shout out Childish Gambino. He dropped a new video for his single, This Is America. It is viral already, obviously, and it's a trending topic all over Twitter. So shout out to everybody who is watching, supporting. I haven't watched it yet, so don't ruin it for me, guys. And speaking of things I haven't watched yet, but is on my to-do list in the next 2 hours, did you guys see Stormy Daniels in SNL's Cold Open last night?
Well, no, I was sleeping.
Stanley, did you watch this?
I did not watch it last night, but I did see it this morning.
Tell us.
And let me explain to you why. Alyssa's not here. You know, every Sunday, Alyssa's like, guys, did you watch SNL? It was so funny. And it's usually not. But this Cold Open really was funny. So I had to make sure that I watched it. They had everyone in there. Stormy Daniels, Scarlett Johansson, who else? Lots of other famous people.
They had Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin,
yep.
There we go.
And so I heard like Stormy had like this epic line where she was like, "A storm is coming, baby." Like,
she's really been on it. She drugged Roseanne Barr a little bit ago. I don't know if you saw that tweet. I cannot reiterate what she said.
You gotta tell us what she said in like the most censored way possible.
So,
little rim work.
I mean, basically, rim work is what Roseanne claimed Stormy did.
Yes.
And
rim work? Well, I'm sorry, what is the term?
20-second timeout. So, Facebook Live, Selena is very young. So, we have to tell her. She'll understand when she's older. You'll understand.
Is the term rim work?
Yeah, you don't like the rim?
So, all right, guys.
Selena,
did you see this tweet?
Yes, if you like 69, Selena,
I
you'll
like
you'll love the
Tekashi
rim.
69, the rapper.
yeah.
Right
69.
now, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
You know what? Fine. Just keep going. It's
Selena, it's like a reach around.
all right. And you explained to me that one time.
Oh my! Oh,
Continue.
oh my! So-
Listen, if you're listening on Facebook Live, just explain to Selena what a rim, what the rim stuff is. I'm sure someone knows.
It's new terminology. How am I supposed to keep up?
And if you're listening on podcast later on, just leave a comment to explain to Selena, or at her on Twitter at MS Hill.
You don't have to do that.
Yes, you should. Yes. And send her pictures and videos too.
Stanley.
explicit
No.
tutorials.
Yes.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Back to the tweet.
So Roseanne had claimed that she did this thing that she did not, in fact,
With her fingers.
do. And so she kind of explained to her that that's not what she's famous for.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And did
More
Roseanne
like a facial actor.
expand?
With the rims, Roseanne didn't respond.
She didn't respond.
No.
Okay. Well, that settled that then.
Yeah, listen, you asked.
I'm not sure what the point was behind that, but speaking of Stormy Daniels, let's talk about Rudy Giuliani. I'm switching gears here a little bit, guys.
No, that's the same.
So
that's the same.
it's in the
AB.
same conversation,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Oh my
So
goodness.
Rudy Giuliani earlier this week, he actually spilled the beans. He was on, I think, Fox News and Friends, and he decides to talk about his client, Donald Trump, and he basically admitted that Donald Trump did know about the $130,000 hush money that Stormy Daniels was paid right before the campaign. And I'm thinking, I know he said it in passing, but I'm like, is he, just making a concerted effort to ruin everything? I'm like, what is
I
going
think they call
on?
that foot and mouth syndrome.
Rudy Giuliani is like the friend. So you're out, you're cheating on your girlfriend, right?
Right.
And your girlfriend suspects it. She goes, I know you were out at the club last night. You're like, no, I wasn't. And then your friend Ronnie comes and you're like, Ronnie, wasn't I with you last night? And Ronnie goes, yeah, man, with them big booty girls at the club. That's what Giuliani just did. And I was like, and it was so funny because Sean Hannity was, he paid. I did not know that.
I did not.
Sean Hannity, I can't.
Y'all share the same lawyer, but you didn't know.
He was like, I did not know that thing.
Like,
Danny Jella says,
Yes.
rim is booty biz, by the way.
thank you for the explanation.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that. Not really,
You don't have to
but
keep it so clean, Danielle.
yeah. So
Kimmy.
I'm trying to keep up with everything that's going on with the Trump debacle, and
Mm-hmm.
at this point, it's just. I mean, Donald Trump, 2 weeks ago, he admitted himself that he was working with Michael Cohen, his lawyer, back when the whole Stormy Daniels things was happening. Because he said, he represented me. And he used past tense. And I'm thinking, this can't be good. This can't be good.
I think ultimately, we as a nation have never really been ultra focused on the fidelity of our executive branch, but we are concerned about lying.
Yes.
We are concerned about criminal activity
Absolutely.
from that office or on the way to that office.
I mean, are we? Because he's
I mean-
been there for a while now.
So I think that we'll discover more along the way. And
Hold on, you got the juice? What do you know?
I mean,
you have some insight that we don't know about.
I'm sure that we will discover more because that's what lawyers do, discovery.
Right.
And there are a ton of this nation's best
That's
lawyers
true.
doing discovery, and they keep excavating more details. So I'm sure I have faith in the judiciary branch.
Yeah.
I think that the fourth of state is struggling, but they're doing better. So as those two try and find new footing in this day and age, right? The judiciary branch and the fourth of state, we'll see new things develop in the coming months.
So for the record, Kat knows Bernie Sanders, so I think that maybe she might have a plug.
Uh-oh.
in there.
I didn't know that.
What you B-Rock been talking about?
Well, I hear there's a lot of people in Iowa still really feeling the burn. And New Hampshire is never going to stop feeling the burn. As a neighboring state to Vermont, he's always been a faithful ally.
Is that because of the rim thing?
It is. It is. It's the back door to Vermont.
You see how you do callbacks, guys? All right, so let's shift gears to something much darker and depressing.
Oh, good.
Alize Smith and Jerron Keontae were found in a pond with their bodies dismembered. Well, as of April 30th, 3 men have been arrested in connection to their murder. So 3 men kidnapped these 2 young men of color, shot them, then tried to chop up their bodies, and then threw them in the pond to get rid of the evidence.
So let's get this straight. The Klan, white supremacists, do we know if they have any connection to larger white terrorist groups, or are they just random white men that killed black people?
It was lone wolf, but there were 3 of them because lone wolves, because, you know.
Oh, my God. So these 3 white men killed 2 young African-American men, a modern-day lynching.
Yep.
And what's happening now?
So, like, they've been arrested, and, you know, they're going to be officially charged with murder and kidnapping. So we'll see what happens. Things have been going so bad in this country, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, a mistrial or they walked away.
A hung jury.
Yeah, you remember?
I can't.
Who was it?
Can't.
There was, I
can't even gasp at that, right?
Yeah.
I can't. How could you? No, I can't.
Yep.
No.
Remember the Michael Sliger case, the cop that shot the guy 5 times while he was running and then threw a taser at him?
Yep.
And then he had 2 hung trials before they finally got him, because in both those trials there was a juror in there that refused to give a guilty conviction on him.
Yeah, and hold on,
Sandra
but the thing
Bland?
is...
No.
No, I'm saying in
Sandra Bland
addition...
as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean...
We're just piling them. I thought we were compiling a list at this point.
That's
a very depressing, sad list. I mean, it's just outrageous, and obviously we know we have an administration that has emboldened people who have always been racist and just filled with hate, and they're just, we're at the point where it's almost not even shocking, because we're almost desensitized to it. And that's what I think is the horrible thing about this. Like, this behavior, the rhetoric from our president and like all the other people that support him, it's almost normalized.
Yeah.
So I often hear, because frankly, I'm the white person at the table, so I'm going to say what I hear. I often hear, but why do we have to bring race into this, right? And as a teacher who is a white teacher that goes into predominantly people of color space in the Bronx, I can tell you that first off, there's what's called a dignity for all training that teachers have to go through and teaching assistants have to go through. I think that this part of our training should be a lot more and also refreshed. Maybe not necessarily on a yearly, but maybe every 5-year, every 3-year type thing. We need more cultural sensitivity to be brought into our classrooms so that we're raising up communities of color, but also teaching cultural history from it's hard. It's hard to go in as a person from a completely different community and teach into a community. And it's important to raise that up, not only in that community, but also in your own community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Catherine, as you mentioned, you're an educator. You teach Black and brown students here in the Bronx. I have a question, because there was this story, very controversial, of this white teacher who she stood on top.
I've got some inside information on this.
Okay, hold on. Let me get there. So this white teacher, she was teaching a class, and a black student fell asleep. I don't know if he was pretending, but he was just really sleepy. She gets on top of his desk, and she starts stomping. She's like, wake up, wake up. And then she puts her foot on him. She literally grabs him by the dreadlocks, and she's like trying to wake him up, and like the students around are laughing. So here's the controversy. Obviously the optics do not look good. White teacher grabbing a black student by their dreadlocks never looks good. But then people were saying, there was actually protests where people were saying this teacher is a veteran, and I guess she was incorporating humor. I don't, it's just, honestly, it's just really hard to grapple, because when I watched it, like, if you watch this video with the sound off.
This is not the story I thought she was going to tell. Because there's a lot of stories out there about what's going on.
There's a lot, yeah.
I'm saying that I think that we need to address what's going on in our classrooms. We need to talk about who we're putting in there. We want the most trained and most qualified people dealing with this next generation.
Absolutely.
And that's often why I speak out about charter schools and why I speak out about evaluation systems. We want to make sure that what we're getting is a strong community-based teaching, right?
Yeah.
I don't know the particulars of your story. You should send me that because I think this is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
But what I do think is that what you need to do is make. I'm shook by this image that you're. It reminds me of the student Xavier, right? Who wasn't allowed to wear the Malcolm X shirt.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yep, I remember that.
I feel like there's these disconnects and not understanding how to engage and knowing when to step up and step back and just listen to a parent, listen to a family, listen to the students. Sometimes they need to take leadership when it's a space that you don't know anything about.
Speaking of not knowing anything, Kanye West.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Bisma.
for those of you who do not know, we traded Kanye West and a bag of weed over to the whites for Rachel Dolezal and Bruce Springsteen.
Yes!
We had to take Rachel Dolezal in the deal. But anyway.
Hey, I support it. I'm all for this.
Kanye West.
Really? We got
TMZ
Rachel in
interview-
them? I don't know. I don't know if that felt like... All right, go ahead. I'm listening.
We got Kat in an earlier deal for Stacey Dash, by the way.
That was a good deal.
That's
a pretty good deal. So Kanye West, during a TMZ interview, said that slavery was a choice. And Derek Perkins, I know you're watching on Facebook Live because I see you, so feel free to give a comment. But he said that, yes, slavery was a choice, and he doesn't understand how for 400 years we just were slaves and didn't fight back.
Yes.
There's been lots of comments by people who drink rubbing alcohol and rub their rims on concrete who agree with Kanye and say slavery was a choice and that it happened for 400 years and people are still slaves. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so lots to unpack
People
here.
are definitely still working as much as slaves do. I don't know if you saw this viral article out of the Business Insider, but we are working more hours technically than peasants did during. I thought that was, we're a worse situation than feudalism. So I'm not sure any of us are signing up for the kind of oppression and exploitation that's now being done. It's both a cultural thing and an economic thing that we're not talking about, at least to the level that I think that we need to be.
No, absolutely. No, Catherine is absolutely right. And I would just say that my initial reaction to Kanye calling slavery a choice, I mean, like Stanley said, like there's so much history and documentation of slave revolts and slave resistance for decades. Slaves always fought back, whether that was passive aggressively and trying to poison their masters, or if it was spitting in their food. Like we always did stuff. And like Kanye is honestly literally brainwashed. He is in the sunken place, and I don't even know what to do with him
Remember
at
last
this point.
week when she was trying to save him, y'all?
I did. We had a full conversation about Kanye last week, and I was like, and then I literally said, like, guys, I understand, he's falling back, but, if we educate him, we can pray for him, he'll come back. And then 2 days later, he's like, slavery was a choice. And I'm like, yeah.
You saw that, who was it from Nigeria that invited him to go look at the slave ship historical sites?
Yes, he was invited.
Yeah, invited for a tour of what it looked like. Do you remember, I got chills, when Michelle Obama went to visit, she said you could still smell the blood.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty deep.
I can't. As I said out loud, the tingles went from my arms to my legs. I remember that vividly because she was speaking to women being stuck down there on their menstrual cycle, women giving birth down there, and what years and years of that being sunk into that area. What that I can't even imagine the visceral of that experience. Perhaps if Kanye goes and visits, he might have a different feeling or reaction.
He'll call it a cruise ship.
Mr. West. On that note, we do need to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, guys. When we come back, we're talking about the May Day protest in Puerto Rico and everything else going on.
Say it again.
Puerto Rico. I was
Never
trying to
say that.
practice.
Never
Okay,
say that again.
I was trying, guys. Forgive me.
It
wasn't bad.
Don't listen to him.
We are back. We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. If you were just tuning in, this is Stanley Fritz. I'm here with Selena Hill and, of course, Catherine Bresler, the future governor of New York State. And when she runs, I will be endorsing her. You know why?
Why?
Because no one cares about my endorsement, but I do. So
that's a lie. That's a lie.
Me.
Mentiroso.
Listen, beloved. Whoa, what did you say just now? Mentiroso?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Liar in Spanish.
Damn, yo, you wrote that R real good.
Yeah.
She's like, mentiroso.
No. First of all, I'm just really used to saying that word to little kids.
Little kids are liars. I love little kids. They lie except for when they tell the truth. And when they tell the truth, you want them to lie because it's like, oh, God.
It's too real.
Always like that.
It's too real. It's too honest.
Speaking of liars, the U.S. government. Just kidding, guys. So, we are switching gears. So, on May 2nd, thousands of Puerto Ricans took to the streets for a May Day march to protest school closures and austerity measures that could result in significant pension cuts, higher college tuition costs, and reduced paid sick and vacation days. Why? Well, because our federal government and the super rich corporate millionaires and billionaires helped to bankrupt the country of Puerto Rico. And now the working people are being responsible for it. Here's what's going on. If you thought things in Puerto Rico were really bad, you need to recalibrate. They're even worse than you could ever think. As we speak, the island is scheduled to close 283 schools. These closures are a part of a series of budget cuts and agency consolidations to set a path for the island to restructure its crippling $72 billion public debt. And on top of that, the governor of Puerto Rico signed a bill just about 2 months ago that pushed to expand charter schools into 10% of the Puerto Rican population and create vouchers for charter and private schools. What is he trying to do? Well, his goal is to privatize the school system in Puerto Rico, because guess who is running the U.S. government and pushing these policies down our throat? The orange man who can't keep his hands off of porno stars. Yes.
Don't just blame him, because there is a huge collective of MFers out there who want to privatize education and have every motivation to do the greatest amount of harm when it comes to education. When you talk about vouchers and you talk about charter schools, what you're doing is, instead of giving all of those resources to the public so that everybody has access to quality education, what you're doing is increasing at-need students' density in one place and dispersing those that would be helpful to the at-need students. One of the greatest resources at-need students have is their friends who understand something just a little bit better. And also, one of the greatest resources to students who are average or above average understanding. I'm sorry, am I going off?
A little bit, but I was going to say it's Cat Bresler. Go ahead.
So one of the greatest things that a student can do is to teach. We are often poised with how much rigor and how much challenge did you give a student. But actually, one of the best things for a student to do is to teach. They get the greatest amount of success and boost to their ego and reaffirmment of their knowledge by teaching another student. So they shouldn't actually spend 100% of their day having rigor and challenge. They should spend an equal disbursement of their time teaching. Each one teach one. If you
yes.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
That should be the way it's happening, but that's actually not what's happening. Actually, what's happening in Puerto Rico is that they're going to close these schools and they want to cut the funding, and thousands of people will lose their jobs. But on top of all those things right now, hurricane season is 5 weeks away, and we expect to see an increase in catastrophic hurricanes this year, even more than last year. Remember last year where it felt like Category 5 was like a popular rap song that hit the top of the charts because every time you turned around, another one was coming? Well, they're expected to be more of those happening. And Puerto Rico and Houston, but we're talking about Puerto Rico today, have been examined, and they are not prepared. How not prepared are they? Puerto Rico doesn't even have all its power back. So let's tell you what's going on right now. So according to a New York Times article, there was a $2.5 billion reconstruction effort, and it had allegedly restored 98% of the grid's customers. And then the power went out again on April 18th. But even with 60% of people still having power, large swaths of the country, in the hilly areas in particular, it's just completely pitch black during nighttime. And if you don't have a generator, you just can't see for miles and miles and miles. Along top of that, FEMA has already started to pull out their funding in support of those people. And as we know, they're under investigation for failing to deliver, I think, about 84 million meals to Puerto Rico and Houston. So all these things are kind of like circling around Puerto Rico. And while that's happening, these people are fighting for their lives in a country that is losing its population every single day. So for this conversation, we really want to put this up into the spotlight and like start to have the conversation, first of all, about these protests that happened. Selena?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to give a shout out to Ray Chacon, who actually left a comment via Facebook Live. He says, "This has been happening for years. The corruption in Puerto Rico is insane. People literally get away with murder. Lived there for 4 years, and I couldn't believe how the government is run there." Thank you so much, Ray. Feel free to call us up at 212-650-6903. We would love to hear your perspective, Ray, since you actually lived in Puerto Rico, and anyone else there. Also, Ken Roy Charrington just left a comment as well. He says, Trump administration and the Congress don't care about Puerto Rico. In fact, the president stated that Puerto Ricans should help themselves as well. That's very true. Shout out to you, Ken Roy. Everyone else, continue leaving those comments. Tweet us at BeHeard_radio and definitely call us up if you can. 212-650-6903.
So, guys,
sorry. It's this rugged individualism that the right preaches that says you should lift yourself up.
Yep.
You don't need A, B, or C, but they have no problem using and exploiting all the agriculture, using and exploiting the people to go to war for them, using and exploiting the people to build the roads and whatever else has made this nation great. That they have no problem exploiting. But the rugged individualism is what do we say? That it's socialism for the rich and the corporate interests and rugged individualism for the poor?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I want to ask you the question because there seems to be a lot of rugged beatdowns happening in Puerto Rico. During the protests, the police there were tear gassing children, mothers, parents, the elderly, everyone. They were going into people's houses and pulling them out and arresting them, breaking into dorms, beating up students and arresting them for the protests. And the governor said that we will be looking into different ways to hold people accountable for those protests. Why has there been such an aggressive police and government military response to these people who are just protesting for their pensions, their schools, and their education?
I mean, it baffles me the way that they're being treated there. The police are like militarized and full gear, and they're beating up like their own people, their own citizens. I mean, all they want are basic needs and necessities. We started off this show talking about like how like electricity's down. They don't have access to clean water. They don't have, the school systems are crumbling. And, stuff like this has been happening for decades. And now we've hit this peak and people, obviously, they're fed up. And they're being pushed out of their own island. And it's not right. So you know what? Even if the protesters were getting aggressive or rioting, I mean, it's an act. I think they're acting out of anger and frustration at this point, and you can't blame them. Catherine, what do you think?
I think that after or on May Day, police force, especially militarized police force, ought to be aware of the historical implications of May Day.
Absolutely.
And of workers uniting on that day and create a more safe space for that to be exercised. Because May Day and the history, back to the Haymarket riot, it's important that the military industrialized complex that has infused itself into the policing of our communities has a good understanding of how to police on that day, especially.
Could you explain it very quickly for the listeners, just in case they don't know, like me?
So, long time ago, there...
Your teacher voice is so lit, by the way. Sorry, go ahead.
So, a long time ago, there were 7-day work weeks and 12 to 18-hour work days, and children were sent to factories, and people thought that was not how we should live our lives, and that we earned and deserved leisure time, and that we deserved healthy and safe working conditions, and that an 8-hour workday was ideal. We should have 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of work, and 8 hours of leisure in our lives. People banded together to fight to unionize, and in Chicago, there was a a protest, and the story goes, nobody knows who started it, but a riot breaks out and 8 died and hundreds were injured. And it's historical in the fight for labor unionization is the Haymarket riot.
Right.
And it started on May 4th and started in May Day celebration and led up to the peak, which was May 4th, the Haymarket riot.
Thank you very much for that education. So
No
now
problem.
we do have a caller on the line. Ray Chacon, let your voice be heard, my friend.
Hello. Thanks for letting me talk for a little bit. I just want to, great show. I feel really strongly about this. I lived in Puerto Rico for 4 years, and when I went, it was during the Obama administration. You guys remember the stimulus package he sent to help relieve everyone?
Yes,
When,
we do.
all right. This is how corrupt the government is there. They actually gave half the portion to the working class and then kept the rest so the interest can grow in the bank and they can pocket off of that and no one else got the money. That's how corrupt the government is there. This has been happening for years. When I was there, I seen literally people getting killed by police officers just for peaceful protest. One, you can actually look it up on YouTube. It was years ago. There was a priest. They were doing a peaceful protest, and he got into an altercation with a police officer. Now, he was holding on to the police officer so he wouldn't get arrested, and the gun went off, grazing the police officer's leg. And he literally took his handgun out and just shot the guy on the floor. And you can look this up. It's real.
Wow.
That's how corrupt this place is. And it's not just the U.S., it's Puerto Rico itself. The people need to rise up and do something because the police and FBI have so much power there. It feels like there are no voices.
Guys, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the ongoing crisis in Puerto Rico. We have Ray Chacon on the line. He's calling in. He lived in Puerto Rico. And, thank you for sharing that story with us, Ray. I have a question for you as someone who lived there on the island for years. How do we move forward now? Are you someone who advocates for statehood, or do you think that Puerto Rico should just stand completely on its own? What do you feel people in Puerto Rico are leaning towards now?
Well, when I was living there, the Independence Party in Puerto Rico is like 2%. It's not really big. They cause a little bit of noise. It's not much. I would rather be a state because they need the funding and help. But the people themselves, they kind of want to be independent, but also want the help of the U.S., but they want to be recognized as their own, like Puerto Rico. We're Puerto Ricans. That's it.
Thank you so much for that, Ray. And we colonized the hell out of Puerto Rico for so long. The least we can do is give them their own status and support them on their feet.
But Stanley, you were shaking your head. Do you disagree with advocating for a statehood?
No, somebody has sent us a tweet.
Oh, that's why you were shaking your head.
Yeah,
okay,
I
got it.
It's not my choice, but
Right.
I think that statehood ultimately would help the people in Puerto Rico the most. They need representation.
Yeah.
That's actually not just tangential.
That's true. That's true. So, who's to blame? Because Ray has just said that it's not just the federal government, it's also the Puerto Rican government that's actually been pretty corrupt. But Donald Trump and his administration has not done a good job in providing the resources that Puerto Rico needs, particularly after the storm. Who's to blame for all the trouble happening there now?
Well, I think that because I listen to NPR every morning, and I didn't mean to give a shout out to another station.
Oh, we all do it. We love NPR.
Yeah, I love NPR.
But what I was hearing were the reports of the pre-gaming for this, as it were, right?
Yeah.
That there weren't enough tarps there sent beforehand, right?
Yeah.
That it wasn't news that this was coming their way. There wasn't enough pre-prep. Right. The resources that should have been in place beforehand are what that lack of setup is what is at fault for where we are now.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So if that's the case, what do we need to do now to get Puerto Rico back on its feet, and not in a way that it becomes a private industry bastion. Selena?
Yeah, I would say that if we look at the history of Puerto Rico, like it was colonized by America, and it, at certain points we needed it for different things. Like during the Cold War, we set up our military base there, and it's like now that it kind of feels like America doesn't need or want Puerto Rico and the responsibility because it's been in debt. Like I think it was at like 72. Was at a debt of $72 billion
we put them in that
before
debt,
Hurricane Maria actually hit the island.
Yeah.
So now it's just like we just want to cut off this island and not give them the resources that they need to rebuild. And I think we should be actively trying to invest and let them have their independence. Or, I mean, at the very very least, statehood, because the thing is they can't even vote for president. But the one thing I will say is really interesting and almost ironic is how all of these people are migrating out of force. They're migrating into the states, into Florida. And I think that Republicans are really concerned about this because if they're all moving to Florida, obviously they're going to change their political demographics there and they might start voting Republican.
You mean Democrat?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, they might start voting Democrat.
That's already started to happen.
Yeah, no, I think I differ. I think I might differ a little bit on that opinion. Historically, what we saw happen in New Orleans when they basically fleece a place where in New Orleans, there are no more public schools. They're all charter.
Yeah. And
I believe that is that they have every intention of doing the same for Puerto Rico. And I think that I think ultimately what they want to do is excavate and exploit the people and the land for whatever they can. I don't think that they're worried about higher density in already blue terrain. And if you look at what they've tried to do with gerrymandering over the last decade, as they've had control of so many of these state legislatures, I think that they're going to continue to try and do that wherever communities of color are finding home, even though they're having to leave the communities. I look at this also. My father's from Argentina, and the Argentinian government also had an IMF loan, and which is different than Puerto Rico's debt. But we ought to cancel that debt. Yes. And I don't think that I think that canceling the debt in Puerto Rico would ultimately free the people of Puerto Rico, and they deserve that. They should rebuild in their culture with their honor instead of watching the corporate establishment come in with cryptocurrency and exploit the people there.
So Danny Jella actually chimed in asking the question, and maybe this is for you, Catherine. What did statehood do for Louisiana in the time of Katrina? Now under 45, what would statehood do for Puerto Rico? I mean,
well, statehood would have, they would get a congressional representative that can vote. Right now, they have a representative that can't vote.
Right.
So I think that I think voting matters. I think representation matters.
Absolutely.
I think that they ought to be honored with representation. They are Americans, and as Americans, we believe in one person, one vote, and we also do have a representative democracy, and they should be represented.
Absolutely. So, yeah, no, guys, and if you want to chime into this conversation, feel free to call us up at 212-650-6903. We appreciate your comments on Facebook Live as well.
And also, thank you to everyone who's been tuning in on Facebook Live. I know that the connection has been rocky today. We apologize, but thank you, Derek. Thank you, Danny, Ray. Let your voice be heard. Just kidding. Everyone else who's been tuning in. But so, guys, we do have to wrap this conversation up. And, I just wanted folks, if you had anything, some very quick final thoughts on what you hope to see happen in the coming months and years with Puerto Rico.
Well, I would say, like Catherine said, canceling the debt would be a great starting point, and giving this island the independence that it wants. Like we've talked about this before. We had other guests on the show who either live or lived in Puerto Rico or were natives of the island, and that's what they want. Like they've been treated like America's stepchild for decades on decades. I don't blame them. And obviously, as they've been under our federal government, we see how messed up their situations are. So they're not benefiting at all. It's like, even for people who call for statehood, like I understand, I guess, like both sides of that argument, because they're like, well, we've been, we've been under the federal government, and we've been Americans, and we've been treated horrible. Obviously, they're people of color. They have a different language. And, because also like racism and white supremacy, I don't think that they would ever have full agency or like be fully legitimized in our country. And I think we should just let them, cancel the debt and let them run the island like they want.
All right, guys. So we do have to wrap up. Instead of giving a closing statement, I'm going to read. I'm going to hand off my closing statement to Dee Negrone, who left a comment that I just thought was too important and too interesting not to share.
Okay.
Dee Negrone says, "This is a perfect example of who the real welfare queens and terrorists are. There is nothing American, patriotic, or Christian about these subhuman shills on Capitol Hill, holding office and running multi-billion-dollar corporations while being protected by men and women in badges and robes, and our tax dollars pay for all of it. America is not a country, it's a business. Your oppression is their oppression." And, for me, and maybe because I'm becoming more radicalized the older I get, don't watch or phone tap me, FBI. But it just feels like the U.S. government is supposed to be for the people, by the people, but every day it's for the business, by the people that run the businesses, and everyone gets left behind. And it feels like Puerto Rico is one of those just casualties of this business-focused America. And until we shift away from that, we are always going to have Puerto Ricos. So maybe it's time to just throw the whole system out and start over. Who knows?
Well, on that note, I do want to thank everyone once again for chiming into this conversation. We appreciate all of the comments and the phone calls that we got. Shout out to Roland Michelle also, who is watching. And of course, Catherine Besler, who joined us in station in studio here. Let Your Voice Be Heard. Again, she's a teacher, an activist, and she created People for Bernie Sanders. How can people contact you and follow you?
It's super easy at KATBREZLER on all of the platforms.
Gotcha. And hopefully you'll come back again.
Yes.
Great discussion, guys. And of course, if you want to continue to support Let Your Voice Be Heard, follow us at BeHeard_radio on Instagram and Twitter. Follow us at Facebook, facebook.com/Let Your Voice Be Heard. And if you really love us and really want to support us and actually keep us on air, leave a donation at patreon.com/BeHeardRadio. Again, that's patreon.com/BeHeardRadio. On that note, happy Sunday. Continue to keep fighting the powers that be, talking about these issues that we care about, and every day just dedicating ourselves to overcoming this oppression. And I think one day we'll see, we'll get there to the promised land.